Welcome to another incubation talk at Dutch Game Garden, as I usually say, but we're in a little bit of a different situation. We're at home, at least I'm at home. Rami's probably at home, and I think all of the people watching are at home. Today we're talking about vision. It's the theme of the day. Rami, everybody's been working on visualizing their vision, so creating a golden circle with images only, and they've been discussing each other's golden circle. And we're moving on to mission, describing your mission statement during the next month. So this topic, seemed exactly at the right time to talk to you about the kind of vision statement that you wrote up during your HKU years, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that was interesting. I mean, when we started Vlambeer, it was kind of a strange situation because I've been making games since I was 6 years old, about. Obviously, I wasn't very good at it back then. JW had been making games since he was 13, and both of us had a success in the games industry, like whether it was commercial or critical or just being part of the industry. We both achieved certain things in the industry, so school for us was a little grating at times. Yeah. So for us, part of Vlambeer was defining what we wanted to be as opposed to what school wanted us to be. And I think a lot of that vision document and a lot of the vision we had early on came from sort of a collision between JW and I that we became very aware of very quickly, that me and him are very different people. We align on like sort of core philosophies of things, but in terms of games and things we like, music, movies, graphic style, gameplay, we don't really agree on a lot of things. So we realized really quickly that Vlambeer would have to be something that we could both agree on. And I mean, for me, that was a good cue to start writing down what I think Vlambeer should be as sort of a compromise between us, and then get JW to read that, agree and disagree, and then sort of.
And because I got this from JP, who you know well, of course. Was this a school assignment, or did you just feel the need to write this?
It was kind of funny. It was technically a school assignment, but I had already started writing something by the time it came in as a school assignment. So yes and no. I mean, I expanded on it a lot because it was also a school assignment. But,
yeah, cool. And at the time of writing, because you say Vlambeer has existed for just over 5 months at this time, and it's experiencing a rapid momentum. I'm guessing you were 21.
I was 21.
Yeah, and it was beginning of 2011 or at the end of 2010 that you wrote that. Yeah.
Yep. We had 1,000 Twitter followers.
Yeah, I was going to end with that, but I'm going to, because that was actually a really cool conclusion. I'll end with the conclusion.
Sure.
You say that this is directly from your paper. Vlambeer has existed just over 5 months at this time, and it's experienced a rapid momentum. Almost 1,000 followers, almost, on Twitter. Interaction rate of 9.32%. Nice. Very precise. We've achieved 517 likes on Vlambeer's Facebook page, of whom 506 are active on the page on a monthly basis. We've achieved a good standing with many press outlets and media outlets. We've established a name for ourselves that focuses on good gameplay. We've won and received nominations for awards both nationally and internationally. We've achieved our short-term goals. We'll get to those later. But as entrepreneurs, we're not done. We're preparing ourselves for new projects. We're preparing ourselves for the rougher times to come. We're ready to tackle new challenges. That's the end of the paper. That sounds really cool. I have to give someone permission to join. Yeah. So we'll get back to that.
Yeah.
Why? Oh no, let's a different question. What does vision mean to you?
I mean, vision is sort of it's a vague phrase, and I think there's a lot of ways to interpret it, and I think there's useful ways of doing it and less useful ways of doing it. a lot of people think of vision as like this is an idea I have, and I just want to make that, and then you just kind of fill in the blanks. I always like to break vision down into short-term and long-term goals. I have a really hard time with sort of middle-term goals, like the 6 months from now thing. I don't really believe in those.
Mm-hmm.
Like I like goals that I can get done in like 2 weeks, and I like goals that I can like work towards over 5 years. And everything in the middle is sort of like you don't know. Yeah, it's so hard to predict where things are going to be.
Yeah.
So the 5-year goals are usually very abstract to me. They're like, want to have a better standing within the industry, or want more people to know about our games, and I define them, but I don't define them too strictly.
Yeah.
And they adjust. While the short-term goals are usually very hard.
Yeah.
But I think vision is an abstract, and I think a lot of people really want to make it very precise and very like eloquent. While honestly, be alive as a studio is a pretty good one.
Yeah.
And then everything else you kind of fill in. It does help to know what you are more than what you want to do. I think that is a big thing that helped with us with Vlambeer, is we knew what we wanted Vlambeer to be.
Mm-hmm.
And your studio is not you, right? It's not a person. You create it, you draft it, you can adjust it. So
why do you think that at 21 you thought of that as important? Why weren't you just, okay, I just want to make games? Why was it important to create a company already?
Well, I think in most parts for us it was important because me and JW were very different people.
Yeah.
Right? Like a company can be bigger than yourself, and for us as Vlambeer, one of our goals was, both me and JW had a little following, but we knew that our followings combined would get more people interested. Yeah. So we created this Vlambeer thing as sort of an agreeable middle between the two of us, and then we would hope, the idea was that we would take Vlambeer and sort of like signal boost it, and then kind of like push it like a mine cart down a roller coaster. Yeah. And the idea was that it would like grow as it rolled down, and then we would hop in at the bottom, and it would shoot back up. And then both of us would get more followers, and then we could point them back at Vlambeer. Yeah. And instead, we pushed the cart, and I think we're still running after it.
It's still going.
Yeah, it's still rolling.
Yeah. Cool.
But I think that's it. Like, your studio is a personality. It's not a person, but it is a personality. And
yeah, I think you call it a persona in the paper.
We called it a persona back then.
Yeah.
But it is a persona. It is a personality. It is a being to people.
Because I was going to ask about that as well. Might as well do that now. You discussed that at length, right? The persona that you wanted the company to be. Is it also something that you actually, I don't know, practiced? Like when you're together, talking about it and just practicing talking to the press, or? Yeah,
for sure. I mean, we didn't sit down and like practice, but we did have sort of early on, when we would do statements, both of us would do statements, right? I would do statements, JW would do statements. Over the years, it has shifted towards me doing most of the statements, because JW just doesn't really care to do that. But early on, what we would do is, if I had a statement, if he had a statement, if we used the word Vlambeer in it, we would email each other and just go like, hey, this is what I'm saying. Do you agree? And slowly on, you get a feel for what Vlambeer would say, right? And
it's you're slowly chipping away at something, making it better every time, over time.
Yeah, nothing is perfect from the start. I think that is also something we realized, is we weren't going to get Vlambeer right in one go, but we could do our best to get it as good as possible, and then just iterate on it, just like a game, right?
And the reason or at least the reason you mention in the paper, is that you wanted everybody to speak with the same persona. So if you the example that you give is that if we were at a game developers conference, we try and put the game developer up front, but if somebody else gets to talk or to show something, you want the same consistent message going out there in the same consistent way.
Same tone, same method of speaking. Yeah.
Right. And
I didn't always agree with everything we said as Vlambeer, right? And JW wouldn't always agree with everything we said as Vlambeer.
Yeah. And the thing is, it fits Vlambeer, and that helps the brand further.
That was more important than whether I agreed with what JW thought about game design or what I thought about, a certain press outlet.
Yeah, cool. And because I think that's a very important point that a lot of young game companies don't always take on board. They're maybe more inclined to do what they want or say what they want, and not always what is best for their company.
Yeah, and sometimes you got to take a stand, and I think that's important too, and people appreciate that. But you have to stay. If you want to represent the brand, you have to take the stand of the brand. Yeah. You have your personal, we live in an age of social media. Like, stuff has changed a lot since then. If you want to take a personal stand, take a personal stand, but know that reflects on your company, and what your company says reflects on you. But unless you as a person are the brand, you're working with other people, and you want to make sure that everybody is comfortable about what your studio says.
Yeah, cool. Also, at the very beginning of the paper, you already talk about risk and being an entrepreneur. So you were very aware that you were an entrepreneur, even when you were still in school.
Yeah, I hate the word entrepreneur, but the reality is Vlambeer is not my first company either. I had two small companies before that. One of them was in game development, and it failed miserably. And before that, I had a small side business fixing computers for people.
Yeah.
So it's not the first time I've done it, and I thinking about what it means to have a business, to run a business. It's basically just you're the person taking the risk.
Yeah.
Right. That's the full story. There's nothing more to it. The only difference between working for somebody and having a business is that when you don't do work as a business, you don't earn money. Right. Yeah. And if you invest and it doesn't come back, you're the one that loses. People might lose their job, which is awful, but you will lose the direct money. That's the defining difference between the two. So you can discuss all sorts of things about being a business, but that is the core truth of it.
And you mentioned that you were already aware that taking risk was part of it. You didn't. I'm just going to quote you here, your paper. We're not encouraging avoiding risk, as risk is a basic part of entrepreneurship and creativity. But minimizing risk does not mean avoiding risky or creative project. It means picking battles wisely. Yeah. And I think that's something that apparently you knew it early on, and you picked some of the right battles probably.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't even say minimizing nowadays. I would say mitigating. Like, you can take big risks. You can absolutely take big risks, but you have to be in a place where you can do that without hurting your business and potentially the people that work for you, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, risk is part of it, and risk is part of game development. Every project you start is, like I always say, like, making games is making all the right choices, because every good choice gives you a coin to flip. Right, and at the end you have to flip a number of coins, and if enough coins are heads, then you have a success, and otherwise you don't.
Yeah.
So mitigating risk is a big part of that.
Cool. All right. Something else that in the beginning of the paper that I think is very important is that you really thought about the core team. Now, obviously, there was just the two of you, but you mentioned that in a game studio, you need equal parts design, development, art, and audio to make the game. But to run the company, you need much more, and you give a little bit of a pie chart. The pies doesn't matter, but it says marketing, meetings, legal, press, video editing, social media, events, learning, which I think is very important, finances, and web development. So why did you perceive those as important at the time already?
Well, I guess because I didn't just want to make games. I wanted to make games and pay for my rent. Like that was kind of the defining thing. Like, I love making video games, and this is a huge passion of mine. Like I said, I've been doing this since I was 6, and I've only made money with it since I was like 19, like a year and a half before Vlambeer. But you really quickly realize that you can make the best game in the world, but if nobody cares, then it doesn't matter. Like if nobody has heard of it. Yeah. So back then, trailers were the big thing. Nowadays, there's many ways to do it. You can do GIFs, but back then, it was trailers. So you need at least video editing. You need a website for sure. You need somebody to do your finances, which are really boring, but you have to do them.
Yeah.
And the legal stuff and the meetings and talking to press and nowadays influencers is a huge part of my job. I would say that, out of my day, probably 40 to 50% is not game development.
No.
And there are days in the month that I've set aside for core tasks like financing. Finances is the 23rd of the month for me every month. And that's just my full day. I don't get to write a single line of code on the 23rd. And I hate the 23rd, but also it allows me to pay the people that work with us, which is really important to me. So
cool. You've already talked a little bit about Vlambeer being a brand. I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit more about that, because you decided early on that branding was very important, but with the emphasis on branding and not advertisement or marketing. You make a distinct difference. Hopefully you remember. But why did you make that choice? Why not a lot of advertisement? Why not marketing? What is the difference to you?
So I think of marketing and advertisement as short-term things, right? And back then we realized that what we needed wasn't short-term. We needed people to attach to us because the way Vlambeer is structured, the way JW's game design works is that they are small games that can get turned around and made relatively quickly. So we wouldn't be just launching this one big game across 3 years, right? We would be working on multiple games over a period of time. And instead of getting people to attach to each individual project and then losing them after that, we decided to attach them to our brand. And our brand was sort of like chaotic, a little stubborn. A lot of it is actually Dutch design in hindsight, like a bit stubborn, a bit unconventional, poking fun at itself, a little satirical, and chaotic. And I think that brand was really good because it reflected a lot of the good qualities of JW's work as well.
Yeah.
So as our collaboration sort of strengthened and I got more involved in doing some of the design stuff, and JW got more involved in doing some of the business stuff, and the programming was always sort of split between us. Having that persona helped us sort of figure out what we wanted to be like. I think there was like the dinosaur zookeeper pitches in this document.
Yeah,
right?
that's true. I haven't shared it, but I see if I can share the image at least, the pitch.
Yeah, because I think that was a perfect encapsulation of how seriously we took our brand. You have to take your brand serious enough to do really silly stuff. Like to really live out that thing. So when we had a pitch meeting with Cartoon Network, which is a major international company, we sent them this really shitty drawing made in MS Paint of a bunch of dinosaurs, and then just copy pasted some like Google image search images in there.
Let me see if I can quickly present it without messing up the entire meeting, because that happens sometimes. Let's see if I can, because I've got it in front of me.
It was quite a special pitch, but it was interesting because by any means it's a terrible pitch, but Sorry about that. Sorry, it was just starting to present, so hopefully you can see that now. I don't know if people can. I can.
Oh, yeah, they can click on the presentation. So this is the, thank you, Joris. This is the presentation, the pitch that you were talking about.
Yeah, we sent this to Cartoon Network and they paid us like $30,000 for it. So that was nice. But we shared this afterwards on our blog. And the fact that we had made a pitch like this, Adult Swim knew what our brand was and sort of expected to get this. And we then got to share that to our social media as like, look at our shit. That all like reinforced the brand, and that just made people attached to Vlambeer more, which for us was the important thing. Like we didn't care to promote Super Crate Box. We wanted Super Crate Box to promote Vlambeer. We didn't care about promoting Ridiculous Fishing. We wanted Vlambeer, and we wanted Ridiculous Fishing to promote Vlambeer. And that's always been the goal, is how do we make things point at Vlambeer?
Yeah, and I think that or at least that vision and that decision, making that early on, is what probably shaped at least the chance of getting a success, right?
I think so. I think a lot of people for a lot of people being able to now that I've been on the publisher side and now that I've been on the side of people making decisions like that, seeing that somebody knows what they are and having a feeling of their tone and their ability to make business decisions is a huge part of why somebody would place trust and money in a developer, right?
Yeah.
So knowing that if we follow this developer, we will get this kind of game, whether you're a consumer buying a game or a publisher, investing in a game, it makes a huge difference. And that is still true today. I don't think any of that has shifted over the past 10 years. It's still brand first and foremost.
Yeah, because that would be like the next question. Like, what would you change right now? Like, has the vision changed? Is just the day-to-day stuff that changed?
I mean, I think some of it has changed over the past decade. Vlambeer turned into a pretty established brand, so I think both me and JW have tried to reestablish our individual personalities a bit more.
Yeah.
We still try to point back at Vlambeer, even with our individual projects. If you look at PressKit or GameDev.world, you'll still see I mentioned Vlambeer on those. And if you look at JW's side projects with Minute and with this room, you'll still see that those point back at Vlambeer as well. It actually was really hard for us to detach ourselves from Vlambeer a bit again, to be Rami, not from Vlambeer, just Rami Ismail.
Yeah, but I think you've introduced yourself as one half of Vlambeer for 11 10 years straight.
Yeah. And I still do, because that is
it's still true.
It is still true. I'm still half of Vlambeer, and I'm still proud of being half of Vlambeer. But obviously, the biggest shift in the industry has been Twitch. Above anything, the relationship between the press and developers and influencers and developers is very different. The press-developer relationship is very run by code, right? Like there's certain things you can do, there's certain things you can't do, there's certain expectations. Journalists have a very high sort of ethical bar of what they will report on if you know them very well, or what they won't report on. Well, influencers literally are just the Wild West. You can send your game copy to a really good friend of yours that's also an influencer, and they'll happily run it. They'll even brag about knowing you.
Yeah.
So the reality between working with press and working with influencers is very different, and takes a very different type of skill. It's a lot less work and a lot more personal.
Yeah. You can't just write a good press release and
because they don't care. No. They literally don't care. They get a million of those a day, and so does the press. But the press knows it's their work to shift through them, and the influencer just they don't care. The press is sort of shielded by this weird idea that they work together, and that together they have to get the clicks to pay for the site. Well, an influencer is literally a decision. That business is entirely decided by analytics. So if a game does well on stream, they'll stream it. If it doesn't, they won't. It's really that simple. But if you're a friend, they might take a hit on whatever.
Yeah. Would you do you develop games with that in mind?
I mean, I think we all do. If you look at the past few years, the way game design has shifted towards multiplayer games, repeatable games, roguelike, stuff that you can play over and over again, you can trace that back to Twitch almost directly, because it's streamable and it's repeatably streamable. And if you can get a big streamer to play your game over and over again, that's free marketing for as long as they play that game. So
no, absolutely. I was looking up something else you mentioned about the press. You say, unlike some believe, the press is not the enemy. In fact, the press are the easiest way to connect to new audiences. Now, of course, that changed it changes every couple of years in our industry, but I don't know if you would write that same line again now.
I mean, I still think the press is not the thing people forget is that the press is not our enemy, but it's also not our friend. They're people doing their jobs, right? And their job is to get people interesting news. And that is different from promoting your game. It's also different from writing bad things about you. It's just if your news is newsworthy, it's interesting. And what people write about or what streamers care about, you have to think about that when you approach people. So when you're approaching press is more interested usually in a human story than in like a bulleted list of features.
Yeah.
Right. So if you send them a bulleted list of features, they're not going to care. But if you have a human story to your game, why you made it, the team that's working behind it, they're much more likely to pick up on it.
Yeah.
Well, for streamers, if you're going to email them, just send them a GIF. Just don't bother explaining your game. Show what it would look like on their stream. Give them a bunch of logos that they can slap on their stuff, and then they'll be interested or not. It's not that complicated. But you have to think about who are you reaching out to, why are you reaching out to them, and why would they care? Because it's never the game. People always think it's the game. It's never the game. Nobody cares about the game. It's this weird reality of working with media.
I love that. Nobody cares about the game. It's very cool. We already hit 30 minutes. I was just let me ask one more question about this document, and then I'm gonna open up the floor a little bit if that's okay with you.
Sure.
I think I maybe already asked it a little bit, but you've heard some of the things that you wrote 10 years ago. If you would write this again, would it change massively? I don't think so, but I'll let you answer it.
I don't think so either. The weird thing about this is we formed this brand, this person that we then got to be for 10 years. We formed that with intent.
Yeah.
Right. So the person that came out of it, the personality that came out of it is designed. And it has shifted a bit every now and then. Vlambeer became a little bit more outspoken over the years about personal things. It has become more active in charity. But for example, at some point, discounts came up, and we had to make a choice as to does Vlambeer like discounts. And one of the things that we decided on early is that Vlambeer would not undervalue our own work.
Yeah.
So we didn't do discounts for a very long time. But then later on, people pointed out that discounts are also a way for people with less money to get access to your game. And we had to figure out how to connect that. So instead of discounts, we ended up doing giveaways where we just give the game away. Or we do them in charity bundles. We add our games to a lot of charity bundles so that we both fulfill the charity part of Vlambeer.
Yeah.
And making sure that people with less money can play games. So
without devaluing the product.
Without devaluing the game itself. And we know that going in discounts would probably make us more money, but it's just not Vlambeer. And it's that kind of thing that I think that it gives people an idea of who we are and what we stand for and what we want to be. And people might like that. A lot of people don't like it. We definitely have our fair share of haters. I definitely have my fair share of haters. But you have to be okay with being you.
Yeah. I think I just found one thing that I think you might change.
Okay.
Part of the long-term targets was support and expand the Dutch independent scene. Yep. I think we can basically, we can strike Dutch and just support and expand the global
international. Yeah. Very first, our goal was because when we started, the independent scene in the Netherlands was very small.
Yeah.
And the companies that were there were pretty internationally focused. Like Ranimo is an incredible studio. We actually hated Ranimo back in the day. It was really funny. We really hated Ranimo because our school would not shut up about them. Because they were the big success. So but we've understood that we're now that. Like a lot of students at the HKU just really wish that people would stop talking about Vlambeer. So it's funny how that goes. We actually really respect Ranimo now. But, back then we just really wanted a Dutch indie community. There just wasn't one. So we started organizing the indie meetups and, trying to help Dutch Game Garden help us and help others.
Yeah. Cool.
It just grew to international.
Yeah, I'm going to say there's more to talk about, but to keep it a little bit concise and short for you, if there are any questions, people, this would be the time.
Hi, Rami. Nice to meet you. Thanks for the presentation. It's super interesting. I have one question, and it might. Well, it's not entirely off topic, but it's kind of like those side things. Mm-hmm. You mentioned influencers. What would you say that their weight is on the whole of marketing? If you could give it a percentage of attention or time.
I think there are different types of marketing. Like the press marketing is very much prestige marketing nowadays. So if you want people to talk about your game, and if you want openings with publishers, if you want to have meetings with platforms, they read the press.
Yeah.
So it's very much an in-industry thing nowadays. Well, it still reaches a lot of people, but in terms of consumers, Twitch can be much more valuable. But it's also the question of what you want it to do. If you want Twitch to just get eyeballs, then Twitch is very valuable. If you want Twitch to convert to sales, it really depends on who's streaming, because some of these streamers have a massive audience of 13-year-olds that don't have a credit card and that won't buy your game because they can't unless they get an okay from their parents. So, PewDiePie is great for getting lots of eyeballs, terrible for your sales because it won't convert to any sales. And also, there's obviously a lot of political conversation right now around a lot of this. So everything kind of comes with costs and weights.
Yeah.
For the way I look at it, for Vlambeer, we want our games to be very streamable because we think it's good continued marketing, but we always start with press. We found that more Twitch streamers watch the press for good games than the amount of people in the press that watch Twitch for good games. Is that same thing where there's this weird reality where if you want to reach the US media, the best way to do it is by emailing Eurogamer, which is not actually a US outlet, but Eurogamer writes their stuff while the US press is asleep. So when they wake up, the first thing they do is check Eurogamer to see if they missed something. There's all of this weird reality of which ways news travel, and press to Twitch is bigger than Twitch to press.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Hope that helps.
Tom.
Hey, Rami, Tom here. Thanks for joining us. I got a question about the current mobile landscape, because you released Ridiculous Fishing a couple of years ago, I think 2009 or 10. How would you go about it today in the current free landscape?
I think the only way to do it nowadays would probably be to release it via Apple Arcade. Like the weird thing is, Ridiculous Fishing is absolutely not a freemium game. It was designed to be the best freemium game that you didn't have to pay in-app purchases for. So we looked a lot at free-to-play games and how they worked and how that feedback loop worked. But then just took out all the in-app purchases and all the stuff that makes those games like feel a little sluggish to us. But yeah, no, at the moment, releasing a premium game seems really, really, really impossible on iOS, because now you're competing with an infinite amount of really good games for a monthly payment that is double the price of your game. Like people, I kind of hate it, but people would be completely out of their mind to buy our game when they can also buy access to 50 games for double the price, right?
Yeah, arcade,
Apple Arcade seems to be the one way to do it. I wish I had a different answer, because I really don't like the direction in which it takes our industry. I like selling games to consumers rather than to platforms. But
do you think you will be making a mobile game anytime soon? Because you're focusing mainly on PC, console, and network influencers.
The problem with mobile is that the mobile platforms keep breaking our games, and they do it like once a year. Like the console platforms, at the end of a console cycle, my game dies, right? But nobody expects my PlayStation 3 game to work on the PlayStation 4. That was just not a thing, because the architecture was different. There was no backwards compatibility. Now with the PlayStation 5, there's backwards compatibility, but Sony is doing it, so I don't have to do anything. That's great. With iOS, every year we have to spend like technically $10,000, $15,000 upgrading our games to fit the latest screen ratio that they implemented, and Apple just retired a PNG library that we were using. So Ridiculous Fishing is actually not for sale right now.
Game maker, right?
No, Ridiculous Fishing was a custom engine. It was based on Open Frameworks, which is specifically made to work with iOS, but even that keeps breaking. Okay. It's just iOS, just straight, and Android both. They straight up are okay with breaking stuff.
Cool. I'm going to stop Tom here, because otherwise he'll ask 5 more questions, and I'm going to pick a few that were on topic. So I like Andreas's question about conflicts. Andreas.
Hi, Rami. Thanks. It's very, very insightful of this. I was wondering, like, when you run into conflicts with each other, how do you solve that? Do you use the idea then as Vlambeer as a persona to solve these things? Do you see it from that point of view and say, like, okay, you and I don't agree on that, but if we think about what Vlambeer does, we could agree on this?
What would Vlambeer do? That's an actual that's an actual thing we say sometimes. I think so. When we were younger as a studio, we would use that phrase a lot. What would Vlambeer do? But I think part of that is because as a team, we didn't have full trust in each other's capability yet. So we would use it as sort of a sparring option. Very early on, we decided that JW would have veto power over design, and I would have veto power over literally everything else. But it really helped because it also makes it very clear who is responsible for what. So if there's a design issue in the game, that's definitely JW's fault. Even if I suggested something and JW implemented it, if everybody then goes, well, this is clearly a bad decision, then it's still his responsibility. Creating those really strict responsibilities also allowed us to say, okay, if we get stuck in a conflict, and the conflict drags too long, because we don't think conflict is bad, but we think 3 days of stalemate in a conflict is very bad. So we allowed ourselves that vetoing power to break through that, and then the other person just has to accept it. That's basically it.
Cool.
That has worked really well. I think having clear responsibilities and having a way to break stalemates is more important than avoiding conflict. I think conflict is very healthy. As long as you keep it respectful.
All right, cool.
Yeah, thanks.
And I see a couple of questions about by Dan. Dan, can you boil it down to one specific one about the topic?
If you look at a specific area in your company in a specific way, then other people might see it completely different, of course. So of course, you do it for yourself, the homework, the golden circle, but also I think it's nice to put it in front of other people to see if they think the same way. And sometimes you realize that maybe your way was not the right way. Did you write something in your document that you look back at in retrospect, saying to you, hey, maybe I should have, maybe I saw that differently before I started writing it?
Yeah, that was actually part of the document. I think we wrote somewhere that it was important to be able to reevaluate our persona and the way people look at it. It is, I think, partially something I'm very proud of was that the idea that we had for Vlambeer was abstract enough that it was very flexible, but still defined enough that we could find a direction with it. I think a vision should always be a direction more than a ball and chain, and direction should be malleable always. And I think that worked out well.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we were really into back then was like games should be games again. We really weren't into the narrative stuff, and we thought that was sort of like suboptimal game work. And I look at that and I just facepalm because, God, is there a lot of great narrative work being done in games? But you also have to be okay with like being a 21-year-old in our case, or like being inexperienced or starting a new company and just getting a thing wrong. Just quietly adjust unless you really messed up and you need to loudly adjust. But preferably like try to make sure that your mistakes are of the type that you can quietly adjust and then improve.
Small pivots.
Yeah.
Did you ever look back at your document? Did you read it back sometime?
I mean, I did, although I have to admit that I think reading it today or yesterday in preparation for this was the first time I've read it in like 5 or 6 years. Okay. It's funny because it's become so natural to us that we are just Vlambeer when we need to be. Like I can switch between Rami and Rami from Vlambeer. And it just works.
Thanks, Dan. I'm gonna take over here and end it. Did you, Rami, do you still take time once a year to talk about this with JW?
It's funny because me and JW really try to minimize the amount we talk.
Okay.
It's not that we hate each other, but we are very different people that think about things very differently, and we don't We don't talk all that much.
But what different question then? Maybe do you for yourself just check in with yourself once a year, or to adjust your entire vision?
So yeah, I check in with myself frequently to see what I want to do, what I want to be. I had a major sort of life moment when I won the GDC Ambassador Award like 2 years ago. And it was sort of like an award for all the work I've been doing in games and emerging territories and international developers. And when you get a big award, one of the weird things is it makes you go like, okay, that's done.
Yeah.
Right. And I really had to go and be like, okay, so I've done that. Now what? And it's funny how often you end up in situations like finishing a game is like really painful. It's really nice, but then you're done, and now you've put so much of your value as a human into making this thing, and now it's gone, and other people have opinions about it. So there's a lot of weirdness to being a game developer that really requires you to have a chat with yourself. And even though me and JW don't talk much, we do this thing where every now and then we'll just go like, hey, are you okay?
Yeah.
Which honestly for me is way more important than talking with JW about the direction of Vlambeer, because if he is okay, he's probably okay with the direction of Vlambeer.
That sounds just like, checking in with an old friend who you not necessarily talk to every day or every week, but that, every once in a while you just get in touch and hey, are you okay?
And I think the best part about it is the amount of trust it displays, because JW will work on a prototype, and then he'll just send it to me, and I'll just start programming on it. And I trust that he has done good work, and he trusts that I've done good work. And if we see something that makes us go like, oh, I'm not sure about this one, we'll just send a ping. I'll just go like, hey, mate, I saw that you did this. Are you sure that this is the way you want it?
Cool.
And
all right.
That's very nice.
I'm going to end it here just because otherwise we'll be talking for another 45 minutes. Thanks a lot for your time.
No worries.
First of all, thanks a lot for your time. And to the people watching and for the tape, thanks. This was another incubation talk at Dutch Game Garden. Thanks to Rami for chatting with us, and thanks for you to just watching this, and hopefully you learned a little bit. Thanks a lot.